Hello, friends, and welcome back to another stream. First stream of 2022. It feels like a year since the last time we saw each other. So it's good being back, but it also feels a little bit strange. Yeah, it's been too long. It's been too long, but now we're back, and I love to see that you're quite interested in the topic for today, which I think is just great. So, welcome. As I mentioned today, we have a new topic. We will talk about Laravel Livewire. We'll talk about how it works under the hood. I'm going to show you a few things that I've learned in the last years. I'm using Laravel Livewire a lot myself, and I hope I can show you some things that you hopefully didn't know, or maybe I could connect some of the dots or some questions you had in your mind. I think it's always interesting to know how tools that you use work. I've been doing this with Laravel, now with Livewire, and with a lot of other things with PHP Storm. I really think you become much better at doing stuff when you know how it works. And since Livewire is also a little bit, I'd say some kind of magic is happening, right? You install it, boom, you have those interactive user interface without writing JavaScript yourself. It's crazy, but I love it. And I think it's interesting to see what Kayla did in order to make that work. So, oh wow. Let's change this here, make it a little bit bigger. I'm also on a new machine, so let's hope everything is working. I shouldn't see anything slow today because this is the new MacBook Pro Max. So no more slow PHP Storm while streaming. I'm also streaming 4K today, so all in today. So let's see how that goes. Oh, hello from Trinidad and Tobago. Hey man, hey Halim, how's it going? Wow, I think that's quite some 1,000 miles away you are. It's crazy, and we just connect and share this moment together. I just love this digital world. Hello Gretchen, nice to have you here. Hello Laurel Magazine. Hello Mo. Hello Sharon. Nice to have you all here, but I think we should start. So let bring me in my screen. Here we go. All right, so this is the live Lara Streamers website. Currently, I should be live, and I am. That's nice, but we also have some streams planned for the rest of the week, and you can see Jason McCreary is going wild again. How many are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 streams by him. And then in February, me and Freek we're doing another casual artisan call. But as always, check out Laravel streamers to find out who is streaming next in the Laravel world. But today we want to talk about Laravel streamers as well, but because of a different reason. So Laravel streamers is also built with Laravel Livewire. So we have a few things happening through Livewire, for example, the submission here where you can submit your scheduled live stream. You just have to enter your link and then provide email address, and then I get your YouTube stream and I can accept it and edit. So this is happening through Livewire, but also the archive page here, which is kind of a list of all the streams. Of course, we're here now locally, so these are just some test streams here, but we can see all the different streamers here. Or we should, let's see. Beyond Code has some streams. I should have one here, and we can also, of course, search for something. So for example, let's search for beer, and we find something, and we get this immediately feedback of the page without the page itself being refreshed, and this is because of Laravel Livewire, and this is because of JavaScript, of course. And but the good thing is we didn't have to write JavaScript yourself. And in today's streams, in the next 42 minutes, I want to show a little bit of the things that I've learned of how Livewire works and how it makes this possible. And I think it's pretty cool. That's why it's also interesting to share. A little disclaimer today. mostly talking about the PHP side of things. Since Laravel Livewire does also a bunch on the JavaScript side, this is interesting too, but I'm more focused on the PHP side because these are more the things that I know of. JavaScript is not my favorite thing, so we'll maybe do this in another stream, or maybe we get Caleb on the stream another time, and then we can check that side out as well. But yeah, today we want to talk more about PHP. And the easiest, most important thing when you use Livewire is you need to know that it works through AJAX request. So this means if we open up here my network terminal, for everything that I do here, for example, changing the dropdown here, there is an AJAX call. Or if I'm changing the spec, or if I search for beer, everything here is an AJAX call. So this means, of course, JavaScript is involved to make this work. We have the AJAX call, we get some data back, it's being changed here, and this is how we get this, beautiful interactive syntax. And I think that's what you already know. I think that's the first thing that you learn about Livewire. It uses JavaScript, but you don't have to write it yourself. You can write everything in PHP. And in order to make this work, there are AJAX calls, so the front end is connecting to your backend. But yeah, you don't have to deal with that a lot because you are mostly interested in two different files. First, you have your blade file, your components blade file, which is here, stream list archive, and then you have a component PHP class. So for every Livewire component, you have those two files which work together. And inside your Livewire component, mine is stream list archive, we have some things defined, like I'm using pagination. We have the query string, so this means with everything that we change here, also the URL is changing. We have here a search input, which is being changed through the input on the front end. We have some streamers, so yeah, a few things happening here. And this component is connected to a blade file, a view file, which is kind of the markup for our component. And here is like the little import, the search, and everything connected to the component. So yeah, pretty sure you know already these things. By the way, please let me know how many of you have not used Livewire yourself. I'm pretty sure most of you have already done it, but if you haven't, let me know so that I know how deep I go with the things that I explain. But yeah, Livewire component, PHP class, and blade file, which is the marker. So that's basically how those work. And these are the things that you need to take care and that you have to deal with. And then on a specific page, you can provide your Livewire component, like here the stream list archive component, and this is how we get it on the page. So let's comment it out. Refresh here, so you see on this archive page, almost everything is inside this component. So let's bring it back in. And I think there are two different ways to check out Livewire. The first thing is the initial rendering. So this means the first time we load the page like this, there is no AJAX request. So this means this also works without any AJAX call. So this means this works a little bit different to how to create this component here than by triggering something from the front end, like this here, which is now an update from the front end and then is being sent to the backend. So these are already two main things that we have to distinguish between. And first we're going to talk about the initial rendering. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're going to start here where we provide the component. So we are having here the component, and now something happens when we refresh the page that we get the markup. But we not only get just the markup for our component, if we have defined some data inside our component, if for example, let's just try this out. If I change here the search property, for example, let's change it to Christoph. When I now refresh this, we will also see it immediately here. So this data is being passed from the component to the front end as well. So This means this also already works. So it's not just about showing the view file of the component, it also uses the data from your PHP component class. Okay. So let's go through now. What's the first thing which happens when we're going to load the page? When we refresh our archive page, then we get to this code here. And this now is very similar to a blade component. This, for example, is a blade component where I'm using it for the layout of my main layout. So this means Livewire or Laravel or Blade or my application needs to deal with this. And this is being done in the service provider of Livewire. And you can see this service provider is pretty huge and it already shows you that there is a lot happening. I always say it's a good example if you're interested in the service container and service providers, what you can do in order to set up a project, a package. It's a cool example to see how it's organized. Because we can easily see, like in every service provider, we have the register method and then we have the boot method. And yeah, it's quite interesting to see, especially in the boot method, what's happening. And I really love how Caleb organized those methods here from the shortest to the longest, because yeah, it just looks beautiful. Okay, but back to the topic. We have our component, our custom tag, and we need to compile this. And what Laravel does with its component, but now Livewire does with Livewire components, is converting the tag to a blade directive. So where do we have this? Here, register the tag compiler. So this means here with the blade compiler, we are registering here a new pre-compiler, and we're using this class here, Livewire Tagcompiler. So this means before Laravel does anything with the blade file, this pre-compiler is being run. And we get some input here, and then we return something. And best to check this out is by setting a breakpoint. By the way, if something is too small and you can't see or read anything, just let me know through the comments. I'll try to check the comments every few minutes, but for now it seems you're good. Okay, I've set here a breakpoint in this compiler, but maybe let's set it here first. And let me now refresh the page. And I don't see anything, and that's because I forgot to clear out my view files. Yep, I think that must be it. Let's try it again. Yeah, that's right. So every time we're running, we're refreshing the page, our view files get compiled and then are being stored as already cached view files, because then we don't have to run these compiler things again. But since I want to show you what's happening here, we have to clear out the cache for the view files. Okay, we can see here is the value which we are being given here. And the interesting thing here is this here. Here's the exact code which we were using. You can see above and below already some things are happening by Laravel, but our code is still the same as we have written it for our component. And now, by the way, I'm using Xdebug here for debugging. If I move on now, we have now already this compiled value. And let's check this out as well. And now you can see what has changed. Now we're using the blade directive called Livewire instead of our custom tag. And I think it's pretty interesting because this is happening for every custom component, Laravel component, blade component you are using as well. So if we go back to the archive page, this means instead of writing the custom tag version, I can also write the directive. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you know lots of other directives of Laravel, like for each, or there are so many in Blade that you already use, but yeah, Livewire is another one, but this now comes from Livewire. And in the end, this is exactly the same. I think it wasn't cached yet, but just to be sure, I have cleared it out again. Let's get rid of my breakpoint. I just want to show you that even with the directive, everything works as expected, so it's exactly the same. And I think we see here, Christoph, because I've changed it here and didn't change it back. Yeah, so let's get tag to null so that we don't have a value here by default. Okay, good. So this means we went from the custom tag to a blade directive. Okay, what's next? Now we need to deal with the directive. And again, this is being done in the service provider of Livewire. Let's get back up here. And we have here another method, register blade directives. And yeah, you can see there are a bunch of directives being registered here. And the two ones that you for sure already know are these ones, Livewire styles and Livewire scripts, because we're using them all inside our layout files. Let's check. Yeah, here I have it already in my main layout file, Livewire styles, to bring in the styles of Livewire, and also somewhere down there, Livewire scripts. Yeah, so pretty sure you have already used them. But besides those directives, there are also more of them. And the one that we're interested in is the Livewire one. And yeah, let's just check out what's happening here. So we get here an expression. Let's get back to our view file to see. So we are providing here the name of our component and an empty array because we don't have any values that we pass on. And then here in the first part here, we're checking if we have a key defined, which we haven't, so we can neglect here the first part, but more interesting here is this one. So we are returning some PHP code here. Yeah, till here. So what we could do is we could copy this whole code here and write it instead of our blade directive. But since our situation here is a little bit simpler, we can also only get this here. Let me show you. So back in here, now our directive gets compiled to this chunk of code here. And what we want to do is we want to echo this out. Livewire, we're calling the mount method, and the name now, we can pass the name of the class, stream list archive class. We call the HTML method, and let's close this. And yeah, I think this should already do it. Again, just to make sure, let's clear out cached view files, and it still works. And I think it's pretty interesting to see really how we get from a custom tag to a custom directive, and then to the code where we actually calling a Livewire class and the mount method, and then the HTML method. Of course, there's a lot, really a lot happening behind this mount method. But yeah, still, this is the first flow of the initial rendering, which I think is quite interesting, especially the first part, because this happens with every blade component as well. So you can use this knowledge for those situations as well. But yeah, of course, we want to know a little bit more. So what's happening here? Let me just check a few more people here. Hey, Adrian, how's it going? By the way, if you have any questions in between, just write it in the comments, and I'll try to check a little bit later. All right, so what's happening next here is we have a Livewire manager, and here we have a mount method. And this is the method which we are actually calling here now, this mount method. So this is where we get inside the Livewire manager through the Livewire facade. Okay, maybe let's set another breakpoint and see what's going on here. All right, here we go. So we are passing the name of our component. In our case, it's the fully qualified class name, stream list archive, and we don't have any parameters. So this means that's why this is empty. It could be that the parameters is a string if we don't provide the parameters, but the key, then we're just setting here the parameters to an empty array, just to be sure here. Then we are creating an ID. Here, let's move on. Here we're checking if the class exists. So if this class here, which we have provided, exists. If it does, because now we use it to get the real name. Let's move in. Here you can see we're getting inside this condition, and after that we should have now the name stream list archive. We could also have just written it like before, just provided the name here directly instead of the class. But as always, in Laravel, in the Laravel world, we are used to those little tricks here where we can use multiple things and you can just use what works best for you. For me, always I use the class, because if I change any class through PHP Storm, this will be changed here as well. Okay, and now what's next here? Now we're getting to the lifecycle manager here. And this is a very important concept of Livewire. So we have some methods here. So first we are creating a request. We're booting, hydration, mount, render, initial, dehydrate, and then create a response. And before I was talking to you that there's a difference from the initial rendering of a component, because this happens inside a normal Laravel request, and then we have like updates triggered from the front end. And this is happening from the front end through Ajax request, where we could go directly to an endpoint from Livewire and directly do something from there. So these are two different situations. And that's why you often see things like from initial request, initial hydrate, initial dehydration, initial response, because there are other methods which work a little bit different if you are doing an update from the front end. But in our case, we have just triggered a full page reload of our Laravel site where a Livewire component was in this page. So that's why we are here, and that's why we're here dealing with this initial process of the lifecycle manager. And yeah, by the way, I really love to see how those methods are changed here, because this gives you an overview without throwing everything what happens here at your face. And you can just define what you're interested in and go directly to this method. So I always like to write my code like this as well, because when I get here, I immediately get a feeling of what's happening here. And also want to talk to you about hydration and dehydration. These are terms that you will read a lot in the code of Livewire. And it's very important to understand what they mean. So in order to explain this, we need to talk about one thing. Livewire is stateless. So this means there is no ongoing connection between the front end and the back end of what's happening with your Livewire components. So if you do some search, if you have some forms with some multiple steps, and it looks like it's ongoing all the time, there is nothing stored on the back end for your Livewire components. It's stateless. Every information that we need for a component is stored on the front end. So this also means with every change from the front end, so with every, let's get rid of this breakpoint here again. So with every trigger here from the front end, this means we need to create a new Livewire component on the back end. And this is empty because it's new. And then we have to hydrate it with the current state of the component. So this is very important, and it took me also a little bit of time, but we have an empty component, our stream list archive, completely empty, we create it, then we hydrate it with the current state. Then we're going to put in our data with the changes, and then we're going to dehydrate it again. So get the data out of our Livewire component again and pass it to the front. So that's how you have to think about it, or that's how it helped me. First, new component, we pass in the data, hydration. We perform some stuff inside our components, run some methods, change some properties. Then we take the data out again of the component. This is the dehydration, and pass it on to the front end. And that's what you see here for the things are happening. Hydration, then we are providing the data, then we do some changes in our component, and then we dehydrate it and give it back to the response. it takes a little bit, but I hope I could explain it to you so that's a little bit easier. With the initial hydration, there is almost nothing that has to happen because the current state is kind of an empty state. So we can also see here we have the initial hydration middlewares, and let's set another breakpoint here. I think it's always most easy to set the breakpoint and see what we are talking about here. So here we have the initial hydration middlewares here. And here we can see it's only one, it's called call hydration hooks. And if we check this out, yeah, you can see what's happening there, and it's only this one middleware which is being run. But if I get my shortcuts correct again, let me see, what was it again? Oh, damn it. I just switched to a new MacBook Pro and I'm not sure if all my shortcuts were imported correctly. At least this one here I can't find, so let's get back manually to this class. Okay, so again, we're booting. Here nothing fancy is happening, we're just dispatching a new event. Oh, come on. Oh, okay, found it. All good again. Then initial hydration, which would fill the component with the current state before the changes. There is nothing to do in our case. Then we are mounting, we're providing our parameters. In our case, we don't have any parameters. Then we are rendering the view. So it's important, the view gets the data from the component, then the view gets rendered to a view instance, and this is then being stored inside this instance. Then we are doing the initial dehydration, take out the data, the now new current state of the component, take out this data and prepare it for the front end, and then we have an initial response. In our case, since we remember it was a full refresh from the home page, so it's not like an API response where we send something back. And this is also why we, let's see, what are we doing here? We're calling the initial response on the response object again. How is it called? Probably just response. Let me see, where do I have this one? Pretty sure it was not prepared. So let's search for command. Was it called to HTML? Oh, damn it. It was running so good, it was just called HTML. So I'm looking for this method now. And I want to search not only in the project, but in the whole site. Here we go. Livewire source response. Here we go. Okay. Sorry. So what I wanted to tell you is that with an update from the frontend or into an AJAX request, we can just return an API response with specific instruction what to do with data on the frontend. But with the initial request within a Laravel lifecycle, so to say, we can't just return an array. We have to return the HTML. And this is why we are running here on the archive page now in our example, the HTML method. And this is where we return the content of the effects HTML, which is also the same which is being returned through the API if we do an update from the front end. So that's also why I think it's interesting to see how this life cycle went from the tag to the directive to the actual code where we're echoing out the HTML of our component. Whew. Okay, so this was the initial rendering, and this is how we get our data, the markup, from the call here to the website. Österreich is good too. Thanks. I love Germany. Okay. Hey Has, how's it going? Yeah, that's where the response was, which I didn't find. All right, let me check the time. Okay, we are a little bit over the first half. Okay, so this was the initial rendering of a component, which I think is yeah, very important to know that there's a difference from the updates from the, if you do change something on the front end and then an AJAX request is being done. The second thing which I wanted to talk today, again, let's get rid of the breakpoint. The second thing which I want to talk about today was the communication between the front and the backend. So let's check out one of those requests here. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Can I hide this somehow? I don't know. But there are two things we want to take a look. First is the payload. So what is the front end sending to the back end? And then the preview, the response, is where we get stuff back from the back. And this will also tell you a lot about how the communication work between the front end and the back end. So with the payload, so what we are sending from the front end to the back end, there are three things. First, fingerprint, server memo, and the updates. The fingerprint is like the global information about a component which is not going to change. So there's a specific ID for the component, the local, a method which was being used, the name of the component, and the page where this component was loaded the first time. This is very important to understand, because if we have components on different pages, then we probably have also middlewares on those pages. So for example, I could have here a members area, and then I load my component behind the login. So this means I can't just call this component then again from a different page. So that's why we need to know which was the original page the component was loaded from. And this way we can check, oh, these are the middlewares we need to run for this request as well. And if it's behind the login and we're not logged in, of course, then it's not going to work. So very important information, that's the fingerprint. Global information, not going to change. Then we have the server memo, which is like the current state of the application. And we were talking about the hydration. So this is the process where we take this data and put it into the component. So in our case, we had a search where the filter streamer was empty. So this was the old current state. And then now here we had a new response back where we have a specific streamer, and this is now the new state. And then with the next request, we are taking the current state again, and this is how Livewire knows what the last state of the component was. Because yeah, there's always some data being involved that is going to change, and this is being stored on the front end. Okay, server memo. We have here a checksum, which is a kind of security measurement. I'll maybe talk about this a little bit later. And then we have here the data of our component. In our case, the current state was search null, streamer null. That's why we sent this to the backend. And there's also an HTML hash, which is a hash of the HTML. And this way the backend knows or can check if the HTML has changed. And if it hasn't changed, then it doesn't have to send it back, because then we don't have to blow the response. Okay, that's the server memo. Server memo is the current state of our application before the changes, before the update dates, which we are going to tell the backend here. So the updates are kind of the instruction for the backend what to do with the state of the component with this data out of the server memo. In our case, we have one instruction. It's a type called sync input. This means an input was changed here. And the input name was streamer and the value is this value. So that's now the instruction for the backend. Hey, we are talking about this component, fingerprint. Take this data, that's the current state, server memo, and then perform this action. Update, change the streamer to this one. So that's the steps that need to be performed on the backend, and then we get back a response. Okay, so let's see what we get back then. If all of those things were working, we get back two things, effects and server memo. So effects, here we can see the HTML, which has changed. In our case, it has changed, of course, because now we only have one stream here instead of the multi ones, which we have seen before. So for sure, the HTML has changed here. And what also has changed is the path. As I mentioned before, we are using the query string inside our component. This means Livewire can change our path here regarding on what streamer we're using or what was the search like. So these are the two things that need to change on the front end for our case, HTML and the path. And then we have the server memo, where we get now a new checksum, which I'll talk about a little bit later, maybe. And we get a new data. So this means the server memo we now get back is what Livewire is storing on the front end, which means this is now the new current state of our component, where the streamer property of our component has this value. And this again is important because the next time we run an update, we don't want to run this update on a fresh Livewire component with no data in it. We want to run it on the last data it was in. And this is why we need to send the server memo to the backend. Because yeah, it could be that we have a post, and the post we have changed the status to published, and then after published something else is being run, and then we need to check what was the status again, and we don't want to check it with the new created component. We want to check it with the last thing we have changed on the component. So that's why it's so important to always store the state of the component, and again, that's the server memo. All right, so let's sum this up again a little bit. Payload, fingerprint, information about our component, what's the name, where was it called, the path, things like that. Server memo we're sending, this was the last state of our component, which we know from the front end, and updates what we want to change on this component. Again, in our case, it's a sync input, but it could also be that we are calling a method on our component class if we submit a form or something like that. And then on what we get back, the response, first the effects. Okay, these are the things that the JavaScript side of Livewire need to change on the front end. In our case here, again, it's the path and it's the HTML. So from the multiple streams which we have seen now, there's only one. And the second thing, the server sending, okay, we have done these changes. First, we send you the HTML, but now here is the new state of the component, the new data, which you need to store now on the front end, because with the next update, this is what this data here in this hash is what we're going to send to the backend again. And this is how Livewire keeps the communication between the front end and the backend, even though it's stateless. It's all being stored on the front end side of things, and that's how it works, and that's why this combination or this communication still works. Whew, okay, this was already a lot. Was it too much already? How are you doing? Are you all good? Oh, your comment is still sticky, Adrian, thanks. Seems like the auto hide feature is not working yet, but yeah, now I removed it. Let me check. All good again. Yeah, what's the time? Should we check one or two more things? Yeah, maybe let's also try to take a little look, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes on what's happening on the back end if we do a change from the front end. So again, let's bring this up. We have already seen that we are doing an Ajax call to a specific Livewire endpoint. So it's called Livewire message, and then it's the name of the component. Okay, let's see what's happening now on this side. All right, let's go to our Livewire service provider. And of course, we are also registering here some routes. This is what I was looking for. Yeah, and here the first one is already the one we're interested in, Livewire message. Of course, the other ones for uploading stuff or previewing files. But in our case, we were sending to Livewire message, and the name was our component. So let's go in here. So here two things are happening. First, apply persistent middleware. And this is what I was talking about before. So if our component was on a page where some kind of middlewares were being run on the initial request, like an authentication check or something else, we have to check if this was the case, because then we have to run this again. Even though it's an Ajax request, we have to make sure that people are not able to get to specific content they are not allowed to. So that's the first part here. And the second thing here is now we need to handle this request, and we handle the specific data which we got from the front end. Again, fingerprint, server memo, and updates. Okay, and now here we are in the abstract connection handler. We are seeing something similar to before. Again, we're using the Lifecycle manager class, and we're running a bunch of methods on it. But now compared to the last one, we are talking about here subsequent request or subsequent response, and only hydration and dehydration and not initial one. Because we talked about it, there's a difference between the initial request and now this subsequent request, how it's called inside Livewire. And now if we go to the hydration part, let's make a breakpoint here as well. Okay, let's check out what are now the hydration middlewares. We've seen before that in the initial request there was only one hydration middleware being called, so there wasn't much happening here. But now we're calling not the initial hydration middlewares, we're calling the hydration middlewares. And here you can see there are already a lot of things happening here to check. So for example, secure hydration with checksum. So we have seen that with every response we get from the server, we also get a checksum. And this is a kind of security measurement to make sure that we're not able to fake the state of the component. Because with an Ajax request, we could use the data and maybe change the old state of the component and say this post wasn't published, it was archived or anything, and then do as, since everything is on the front end, I think that's what I'm talking about. Since everything is on front end, we could change the data of the current state of the component, but with the checksum, we make sure that this is not possible, because the checksum checks if the data fits together. I think it's the data of the server memo and of the fingerprint, and they are together being hashed to something, and then the checksum checks if this is a valid hash, and with the Livewire key of this checksum, it sees if this is valid data. And this way it makes sure that we can't just send anything back to the backend. And it's a very important one, because without that, we could do a lot of bad things. Okay, then what's also happening? Hydrate public properties. Okay, so if there's if we change, for example, for our streamer search, if we search for a specific streamer, streamer is a public property on our component, and here in the hydration process, we're setting it to the old state. So this means we're not setting it to the new stage if we search for something new, but we're sending it to the old state because later we are then running the update and doing what is changed. And there are also hydration hooks. There are a lot of hooks in Laravel Livewire you can hook into, and this all is being checked. And is there anything I want to show you? No, but yeah, important here for the hydration process, which is triggered from the change on the front end. There is a lot of things which need to be run through. All right, what was the next thing? Again, render to view, so that's the same before. And now hydration is the same as before. We need to get the data out of the component, out of our component with the changed stuff. So at this point, the things that we changed through some input, like from the search, has already happened. The data is now at the new state in the component. We are rendering this, and now we're creating a response here. And again, if we go to the response method, what was it called again? Let's check here. I couldn't remember. To subsequent response. Here we go. And here are a few things happening, like embed the ID in HTML. Yeah, maybe this is something which we could check out as well, because I think those little things are also interesting to see here. So at this point here, we're inside the response. Effects, here we have our effects, so what has changed, and the HTML has changed, and here we have some information like the div. And now we are embedding the ID in the HTML. So if we move one step forward, we should see now here, now the wire ID has been added here to the component. So that's one thing that's happening here. Is then here we are checking what are the things we're going to change. And if the values are the same, we are skipping them because we don't have them to deal with them. And then somewhere down here, we are preparing the data which we then send back to the browser. Effects, what has changed? Again, in our case, mostly HTML and the path, and the dirty memo, so what is different now from our component from before, which is now the new old state of the component in this way. And now that I thought of it, one thing I also wanted to show you is probably need to get rid of our breakpoint here. Have I still set one? Yes, I have. All right. Let's run this again and let's view the page source. Yeah, so we've seen that we've added the wire ID to our component. But also what we don't see here is, if we check here, if we look here for the wire ID, we see this on the component, but we don't see anything else. But if we see the original page source, we can see that there is the initial data. And maybe you have already asked yourself this, because with the first initial request, there was no way to tell Livewire, hey, here is the server memo, here is the state of the component, here is the data which you need in order to fill the front end, because it's running inside a Laravel request. But how Livewire does it, it puts it inside the component, inside this wire initial div. And here you can see is all the data that Livewire needs. And it takes this out and then removes it, and that's why we don't see it here anymore. But this is only being run after JavaScript was initialized through Livewire, through the Livewire side of JavaScript. And yeah, I think it's pretty cool to see how this is working, because that the data is passed in here and just Livewire grabs it and put it into its components on the front end side. Because there's one, is it a class? I'm not sure, I'm not good in JavaScript. maybe JavaScript class or a JavaScript component for every Livewire component which we have. Whew. All right. Let me check the time. I think from time we are good. Hey Nathan, how's it going? Let me check my list here. I have those fancy old school lists here with the things I wanted to show you. Yeah, I think that's basically it. So the idea was to give you a kind of introduction in, if you have no idea how Livewire works, what are the things where to start to take a look. And I think now you have a good idea. Check the request, see what your frontend is sending, what the backend is returning back. That's always good. Then also in the Livewire service provider, you see what are the things being registered there, like the routes, blade directives, the new pre-compiler, and all those things. And yeah, if you go step by step, you can learn a little bit more about how Caleb and the community who helped build Laravel Livewire. And I think, yeah, as I mentioned, I think it's a good idea to know how the things are happening, because yeah, this will also help you a lot while using them. Okay, I was digging into Laravel Livewire because I created some videos for it on my Laravel Core Adventures platform, which is a platform where you can learn how Laravel is working under the hood. So we're checking out how the notifications work, how the service container works. This is really a good one, an important one, how Eloquent works under the hood in Laravel, how facades work, and so on. And there are many videos. You have 1 or 2 for every chapter, which are completely free just to check out, so you can get a feeling of what I'm going to explain here. And if you're interested in more of them, you can unlock the pro version and then have access to all of them. And at the end of last year, I also did this for Laravel Livewire. So we have now currently 8 videos about Laravel Livewire, how I explain the things that I did today, but with more details and a lot more things we are going to talk about, like what's happening if we're passing data, what happens on the security side. There are a few things, and yeah, many more. So if you're interested in what you've learned today in Laravel Core Adventure, please give this a look. I also have somewhere here, if I find the right dot, of course, now it's not working. Let me see what's going on here. If I can bring them in manually. No, it seems I can't find them. Okay, so this means we're going to do this now together. I'm creating here a new overlay to share with you. Where do I have it? I thought I was well prepared, but it seems you can always prepare better. That's what I'm talking about. What I have for you is 5 times minus 15% coupons code for Laravel Core Adventures. This looks horrible. Let's make this wide. Let's add this. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Here we go. So these are 5 times minus 15% discount coupon codes for Laravel Core Adventure. It's called LCA-loves-streaming, and yeah, you get minus 15% for Laravel Core Adventure. Only valid today. So if you're interested in Laravel Core Adventure, check it out. Okay, let me see. Are there any questions? In JS, a class is called component. Yeah, even better. So JavaScript components. Oh, Nathan is in the Keychron team, which I am now into. How are you dealing with Keychron? Is it? It's nice, but I'm struggling a bit too. Yeah, I'm still struggling. It's strange changing keyboard. It really is strange. If I would have known how difficult it is, I might have wouldn't switch. Difference between Inertia and Livewire. Yeah, this is something where I can't really help in detail. Overall, the difference is in Livewire, you don't have to write JavaScript, so you don't care about the JavaScript side. With Inertia, you are writing JavaScript. You can pick Vue. I don't know what others are, React, what others are being supported, but you still write JavaScript. But just the connection of using your JavaScript with Livewire with Laravel is much easier and in a much better way. So I think the best way to think about it is, do you like writing JavaScript? Do you like to write your JavaScript component yourself? Then use Inertia. If you don't care about the JavaScript, want to write everything in PHP, then use Livewire. That's why I have chosen Livewire, but I need to check out Inertia as well. It's pretty cool, and today they released server-side rendering for Inertia, so yeah, amazing product as well. Okay, any more questions? No, it seems we are good. All right, so let's bring back my screen here and get rid of the comments. Okay, so I hope I could show you today a little bit more about Laravel Livewire, how it works, what are the things to take a look at if you want to know a little bit more. What is the difference between the initial rendering and update subsequent renderings? And yeah, I always think it's good to know how the tools you use are working. And yeah, with that being said, I think this was already the first stream for 2022. If you have any things you want me to stream more about in this year, just write it in the comments. As always, please like the video. If you haven't yet, this always helps me because YouTube will know that the video was good and will help placing it in the search. And as always, subscribe if you haven't yet to my streams if you think they are of interest to you. And yeah, I guess we're then seeing each other probably next week with another stream. I have no idea what it will be about, but there will be another topic for sure. So yeah, thanks everybody for joining. It was a pleasure having you, and see you the next time. Bye.